Welcome to another episode of Mark's Musings. I'm Mark, your host, and today we have a special guest by the name of Jeff Higgs, who is an artist and writer from the Wilmington area. We are broadcasting here at wctv.org in Wilmington, Massachusetts. And I met Jeff a couple of years ago at a writers group from the Wilmington Memorial Library, and he has gone off to continue his writing experience, and he has written a whole load of stories, short stories that he has published in over 30 magazines. And I have a little blurb here that describes some of his writing. But before I do that, I'm just going to say welcome, Jeff. How you doing?
Very well. Thank you very much for inviting me, Mark. It's a pleasure as usual to see you and to have an opportunity.
It's always a pleasure to see you too, and to talk to you. You're always very interesting and have a lot of good things to say about things in general, but also the writing, the art of writing. Well, I just wanted to say something about Jeff. He has published in over 30 magazines, including Indiana Voice Journal, Black Elephant, The Writing Disorder, Contrary Magazine, Literary Stories, The Remembered Arts of Journal, and he's been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. He lives here locally with his wife, and his son and daughter also live close by too. So we'd like to welcome him here and talk to him a little bit about his journey into the abyss of writing. So again, welcome. Tell us a little bit about how you got started, Jeff. How did you get started in the writing career?
The first short story I wrote when I was actually in the 4th grade.
Oh, neat! Wow.
And I continued to write off and on through college and things like that. And then I attempted to do some writing post-college and really did not have very much success. So I decided probably I should really pursue it, to be perfectly honest with you.
Sure.
So I stopped writing and really took about I guess I call it now my 33-year sabbatical from writing. And I resumed actually shortly before the writing group at the Wilmington Library was actually formed.
Oh, neat.
And my wife had suggested that I consider joining the group, and I had mixed feelings, but it ended up being a great experience, and has really sort of led to a lot of the writing that I've done.
We certainly contributed a lot to the group, and you always had positive things to say and give us good tips about the writing.
So thank you.
Yeah. So that was great. So that's how you got started.
Yes.
And so where did you, some of your first writings you submitted to the writers group,
Yes.
and then later you took some of those and submitted them to magazines?
That's correct. I submitted short stories to the folks in the writers group. They were really helpful, reviewing the stories, giving me back some constructive criticism and feedback, which helped me refine the stories themselves.
Yes.
At that time, to be perfectly honest, I was not really thinking about publishing. I was just working to try to get back into writing. And I had the fortunate opportunity to meet Holly Robinson through the writers group.
Yes.
And Holly had said to me, gee, if you have something that you think might be of interest to me, why don't you send it to me?
Nice, yeah.
So I took Holly up on her offer. She is a professional writer. She is also here in Massachusetts, has published a number of novels and things like that. And the work that I sent to Holly, she actually sent back to me with a note some suggestions, and she also said, "Gee, I think you should try and get this published." So I really owe a lot of it to her and the encouragement that I received from her and the folks in the Wilmington Memorial Library Writers Group.
Yes.
That's really what led to my initial attempts to get published.
Sure. Well, it's nice to get a little pat on the back because you don't know whether you're, just beating a dead horse. You want to make sure that what you're doing is actually going to be looked at by other readers, listeners, and thought of as something that they were interested in and that they may even go back to again. So it's nice that you got that encouragement.
Yeah.
And so what happened after that?
Well, I submitted a number of stories, and the first story that I actually received an acceptance on was a story entitled "Something About Her," which was actually one of the stories that Holly had read and made some suggestions to me.
Yes.
It was kind of a surprise to get my first acceptance, but once I sort of received that, then you really feel, gee, I feel great. I want to try and repeat this, do this again. So
Sure.
so I continued to try to learn more about submitting, learn more about writing and editing, and I took some courses through Grub Street,
Oh, yes.
which
yes.
is a writing educational group that exists in Boston.
Mhm.
They offer various seminars and things in writing. So I did some courses with them, and that was helpful to me as well.
What were some of the better things that you might have got from Grub Street, for instance? Did they have formal classes, or did they just online, or what kind of a venue was that?
Sure, Grub Street offers courses, excuse me, online as well as at their facility in Boston.
Okay.
I actually went to their facility in Boston to take some classes. One of the courses that I took was about editing
Okay. Yes.
and
yeah.
trying to make sure that in the work that you have written, you are able to identify the sub-themes as well as the major themes, and then in the course of your editing, look to make sure that the work is very cohesive, that these sub-themes work very well along with the themes.
Sure. So it's not just the editing is not just the grammatical corrections, but it's also learning about the setting or the plot or the character building,
Sure.
development, things like that.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So that was great. So you got a lot of information from Grub Street, and that put you on your way. So
Yes, one of the other courses that I took there also was about submitting,
Okay.
where they actually provided information, suggestions, and ideas about how to identify potential publishers, what to include in a cover letter, and things like that. Some of the nuts and bolts, how to keep track of where you have submitted your work. All of these things are, of course, excuse me, very important to help you, since it's a fairly competitive environment out there.
yeah, I heard that. I've also tried to submit a lot of different things, but you get a lot of rejection letters, and you just get disappointed because they pile up and up and up. But hopefully, once in a while you get a positive letter that gives you some encouragement.
Yes,
Yeah, so that
definitely.
was great. That's good. Good. So, so then what's after that first story that you got accepted?
Mhm.
What happened after that? That you?
Well, I continued writing, and the second story that I got accepted was a story entitled "No Guns,"
Yes.
KNOW guns. That was another story that actually had been workshopped with the Wilmington Library Group, and that particular story dealt with a young couple who is visiting the wife's father And upon arrival at the cabin, what happens is their young son runs upstairs looking for the grandfather, and instead what he says to them is, "Hey Dad, you know, Grandpa has a gun." And suddenly the father realizes that the child may in fact have his grandfather's gun, and that's kind of the opening of the story.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah. So there's a theme behind that about the positive and negative aspects of having a gun or owning a gun, or
Sure. Yes.
etc. So,
Hmm.
so that's great. Yeah, there seems to be in all the stories that I've read of yours, there's always an underlying theme there that you try to reach the reader. You know that leaves them with some kind of a message at the end.
Hmm.
So that sounds great. Yeah. Um, I remember also reading one of your stories. What was it about Emmy's wake and
Yeah,
what's
Lee's funeral, Emmy's wedding.
Emmy's wedding?
Yes.
Lee's funeral, Emmy's wedding. Yes. So tell us a little bit about that one. That's kind of a
That
cute one that got off.
yeah, that was that's kind of an amusing story, I guess. What really is the premise behind that story is that there are two men who were very good friends, growing up and everything else. And what happens is one of the men receives a phone call from his friend's daughter, and he's expecting to hear from her because she's going to be getting married, and he's her godfather, and he's looking forward to going to the wedding. And she basically calls and tells him that her father, who had been his best friend for years, was dead.
Oh my God.
And had recently died. So he is sad because they had a falling out,
Yes.
and he had not spoken to his best friend for an extended period of time, but he was going to attend his goddaughter's wedding. And then she informs him that he and his wife should come a little bit early for the wedding, because they're actually going to hold the funeral for her father right there in the church
At the same time.
before the wedding.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the premise of the story, is that they're going to go there, and you know, there's this person who's deceased,
Yeah.
who I guess attends his daughter's wedding. And in the course of the story, you
Why
learn
not?
more about the
Yeah.
characters
Yeah.
and the relationship between the two men, and you know, and things like that. So
How do you? That's good that you mentioned that. Now you said you develop the characters. You talk about each them. So it's not just their physical features that you talk about. You also have to develop a feeling for how they think, or what they like and things like that. How they
Mhm.
speak. So How do you develop a character?
I think all writers really draw upon their life experiences. They draw upon their remembrances of people that they've known, and that becomes the building blocks for the characters to some extent that you create in your story. As you begin to write your character, I think the challenge then becomes to really try to understand as much as you can about that particular character, that person, and to try to convey them and create them on paper in a way that is realistic, is going to be realistic for your reader.
Yeah. So while you're developing that character, you have a dialogue going on between one or two or three people,
Hmm.
and during that dialogue, the character becomes alive, and
Yes.
it gets developed. So the character isn't telling you that he has red hair or pimples on his nose or anything like that.
Hmm.
But during the conversation, you may learn about some of those things that he's maybe self-conscious about the way he looks, and somebody says, well, you shouldn't be, and things like that. So that's where the dialogue becomes so important. Is
Yes.
that you flesh out the characteristics of the different people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to some degree, I guess we could say most writers have a desire at some level, or they have in the past done some acting.
Yeah.
You know, because as an actor, you're charged with creating this character so that it's believable to the audience, but the character has to be unique. It can't be you. It has to be this character that fits in with the whole of the play, and the same is true of the story. So you try to discover what I guess I would call the character's voice. Different people speak different ways. They have maybe particular mannerisms that they use frequently, and those are the types of things that you try to bring to your story to make your characters unique individuals.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the voice. Now, when you start a story, are you always telling it in the first person, or are you always telling the story through the main character, or do you sometimes tell it as omnipotent character from the outside, sort of godlike, looking
Sure.
down from outside and sort of telling what's going on? What is your favorite, or do you have a favorite?
I don't really have a favorite. In looking at my stories, I see that some of them are told from first person perspective, some are told from third person perspective. At times, minor characters may be the person relating the details of the story. So I don't really have one specific approach that I gravitate toward more than the others. I think what becomes important is as you start to work on the story, you find the way to tell the story that as a writer you're most comfortable with and that you think makes the most sense.
Yeah.
You know, I've had some cases where I may have started in first person and it just wasn't working, but then when I went to a third person perspective, it worked.
So do you feel that you can switch back and forth from different points of view?
Yes.
So you can, like, you might start a story at first person and then you might flip it to third person.
For me, I would say typically the story is voiced from start to finish in one or the other.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it is, yeah, okay. So, but that's it. That's interesting because we've been having a discussion about that at the writers group about point of view and how to talk either in first person or somehow switch your point of view midstream.
Sure.
But it's difficult because sometimes without realizing it, you'll switch the point of view, and then you don't know that you have done that until somebody points it out to you.
Right.
They say, oh.
One of the challenges, which, as you mentioned, the challenges, is the fact that you have to be conscious of what does the character know or not know.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, if you have an omniscient narrator, well, the omniscient narrator knows everything.
Yes. Yeah.
However, if you're telling something from the perspective of a specific character, that character can't know and doesn't know every single thing. So you have to be kind of careful because as the writer, you do know everything.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah. So it's difficult telling a story without knowing everything. So
Yeah.
you really. So what are some of your best stories that you have written, and tell us maybe a little bit about? I know you've published in 30 different magazines, but are there some stories that you like better than others?
Well, I guess the best way I could answer that question would probably be to talk about a couple of the stories that people seem to like
Oh, okay.
a lot.
Yes, yes, yes.
So one of the stories is entitled Cold Water.
Oh, okay.
And Cold Water is a story, and this was another story that actually had been reviewed by the library group when I was a member of the group. Cold Water is a story about two brothers. And what happens in the course of the story is that the two brothers have been stuck indoors because the weather's been very bad and it's been very rainy, and finally the weather breaks and they're able to go out and to have some fun. And as they're having fun, one of the things that they like to do is to go to this river that's near where they live, and as they go to the river and they're having fun there, a tragedy ends up taking place.
Oh, yes, yes.
And so from that point on, the rest of the story is really about the ramifications of this tragedy and how it affects the fact that these two brothers, participated in this event that had tragic consequences.
Oh my God, yes.
And that seems to be a story that people,
Resonates.
readers have really liked and have gotten back to me on. Another story that got a lot of positive feedback was a story that I wrote entitled The Lady Next Door.
Oh, yes, yes.
And that's kind of in a different vein. The Lady Next Door is a story about there's two young girls.
I just read that. That's a cute story.
Yeah, there's two young girls, and they live next door to this woman who the entire town is afraid of this woman. And it sort of begins with the young girl's character saying, everybody's afraid of the lady next door except me. I'm not afraid of her. And in the course of the story, you learn the background of what led to the people in this town being afraid of this woman. But the girl ultimately learns the true story of what had happened and what took place. And so in the end, she and the woman ultimately come to some mutual understanding and a relationship.
That's great. Yes, yeah, and so you don't want to give the plot away, but it was a very interesting story. I enjoyed reading it, and sometimes you can't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly.
And so you have to dig a little deeper to find out the true meaning or what happened, how people are really feeling about themselves and about the world around them. So, so that was an interesting story. I like that one too.
Oh, great! I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yes, yes. So, what I'm trying to think of what else now. When you so if you submit a story to like a magazine or something, sometimes there's a long waiting period.
Yes.
It's not just you submit it and then next week you get a letter. Sometimes it might be months.
Yes.
So can you elaborate a little bit on that? Or?
Yes. What is happening right now is that the submission queues for the magazines have really been getting flooded.
Oh, yes, yes.
And what I have noticed, and some of the other writers that I know who also are actively submitting work have noticed, is that the wait times have increased dramatically this year in 2019. Previously, you probably would get a response from the typical magazine in 1 to 3 months.
Yes.
Now, responses are in some cases taking as long as 6 months.
Oh my God, yes.
And while you're waiting, you're of course wondering, gee.
What happened?
is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Are they going to take it? Should I submit to some other magazines in the meantime? So it's becoming a little more challenging to really make some decisions. I guess my approach really is to be willing to continue to submit to those magazines that accept simultaneous submissions,
Okay.
because you never know.
Yeah.
You just never know.
And it's probably good to even submit the same story to a few different magazines.
Exactly.
Because once you get accepted, then you can always tell the other magazines, that you thank you very much for consideration, but I've been accepted somewhere else.
Exactly.
And,
Yes.
you don't have to sit around waiting. So that's a good suggestion right there. So that's good. So you have taken a hobby of yours and you've developed it into an obsession, so to speak, that you really have enjoyed this whole journey into writing, and it seems like you're having a lot of fun doing the writing and editing it and meeting different people. Are you giving talks to different groups, or are you doing anything like that, or?
Not very much.
Okay. Yeah.
I have been invited a number of times to speak to the library writing group,
Yes.
to share with them at least my thoughts and my perspectives on certain aspects of writing and things like that, and that's been great. It's as helpful to me as I hope it is to the people who have come and participated. Outside of that, I have a very good friend who is another writer, and we met actually through a magazine that we both had been accepted at and were published at, and then we met through an online course, actually, I should say. But she and I send each other drafts of our work, we critique each other's work, and we try to keep each other's spirits up. And I think that's important.
You seem to have a lot of success with submitting to different magazines and being accepted. And so once you get accepted to one or two magazines, is it easier for you to get accepted to another magazine because of that track record?
I don't know.
So,
I think it helps somewhat.
so you do say, I have been accepted to this
Yes.
and that, so they may look at you,
They
give you a second look.
right. They look at your bio, and some folks maybe know the editor, or they've worked with someone from that other magazine. So maybe it does get you a second look, or a little more consideration because they respect that other publication. But in all honesty, I don't really know.
Yeah.
I do know that there are magazines where what as a writer you will find is that your writing fits them.
Yeah.
And so if they publish you once, you are then in a position to begin to develop more of a relationship with them. So there are some magazines that have published a number of my stories. They published maybe one that was an original, and then they published another story that basically they reprinted.
Oh,
They
yes,
they
yes.
liked it enough. Someone
Yeah.
else had published it originally.
Yeah.
I was able to send it to them, and they said, "Oh yeah, we like this too. We'll reprint this so that
Oh.
more people
Yeah.
will have an opportunity, hopefully, to read it."
So when they reprint it from a different magazine,
Yes,
do they have to make a note that it had been previously? Okay.
yes. What you really want to do is to ask them to give credit
To the
to
previous.
the original
publication.
publisher. Yes, that was where it was originally published. Yes.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Now, are you doing anything to increase your author platform, like the people who write books, for instance, try to submit their books to different book companies, and then they go out on tour, and etc. Do you find that your readership has increased over the last year or so, and how?
It has, and I would say the primary way that has happened is through a Facebook page that I
Oh, yes,
have
yes.
created.
Yeah,
It was suggested to me by a number of people, yourself included,
yes,
because originally I did not have Facebook or do any sort of social media type thing. So I did create a Facebook page, and on the Facebook page that I've created, I will actually put a URL to a story when it's published or reprinted, so
Yes.
that they're all there,
yeah,
and it makes it easier for people to at least be able to, if they're interested in, go and see the stories that have been published that are available online, if you will.
yeah.
What has happened as a result of the Facebook page is some editors have pointed other editors to my Facebook page, or have recommended me to friends of theirs.
Oh, neat.
So I'll get requests every now and then from people who I don't know,
Yes.
but they've either liked my Facebook page, or they ask, gee, could they be added as a friend, because they would, they've read something I've written and they would like to know when future things are published. So
Sure, very, very good. Now, do you get reviews on some of your stories? Do people make comments and things like that? And what do you do with some of them?
okay, I'm laughing only because yes is the answer to your question.
Yes.
Most of the online publications do ask the readers to comment
Yes.
on the story if they would like to. So I do get comments, and I don't read them, which is
Oh, my God.
why I'm laughing. I don't read the comments on my stories that are online. Other people, friends and things like that, who have my email address and stuff, they'll send me a note, because I do typically send out an email to my friends and some other people who have expressed an interest in knowing when my stories are published. And very often after they have read the story, they'll send me a note directly.
Okay, yeah.
But I really don't read the online comments, which has become kind of a funny thing between myself and my writing pal Sharon, because Sharon reads the online comments
Yeah.
for my stories, and then Sharon will say to me, "Oh well, this person really liked your story," or whatever. So it is kind of
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of a funny thing, I guess.
Well,
that I don't read the
they say that
comments.
your reviews sometimes are good because they spread the word
Mhm.
about your stories, and whether they like them or not like them. But most often, if they write a review, it's a positive thing, and your readership increases. When
Yeah.
somebody reads a review and says, "Oh, this was a great story," and they might say, "Gee, well, maybe I'll read it." Because sometimes people will read the review before they read the story. And
Yeah.
they see what.
And I probably should read the reviews.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the reason why I decided very much at the beginning not to read the reviews was because I felt if I got negative reviews,
You don't want to get disappointed.
yes,
Right.
it would be painful. So,
Oh, my God.
so I figured I'd spare myself the pain, and just kind of decide I'm not going to read any of these reviews.
Well, I don't see, I suppose there's a bad review everywhere, but
Yeah.
for all the stories that I've read of yours, I can't imagine them not all being positive reviews, because they all have a nugget of information to provide, to give to the audience, and I thoroughly have enjoyed them.
Thank you.
I think we sort of have reached end of
Mhm.
our podcast here. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before I close? I know I'm going to ask you if people would like to get a hold of you or read some of your stories. Could you tell us again how they would look at get your Facebook page, for instance?
Sure. Under Facebook, they would be able to do a search for JL Higgs, Higgs, dash artist writer as one word.
Okay.
And that would allow them to actually access my Facebook page.
Oh, great.
And there they'd be able to see the URLs for the various stories that have been published, and also see some of the artwork, the drawing that I've done that I've posted online as well.
Yeah, because you do need something like that for our audience here, sort of a key that opens up the door
Sure.
to your other avenues, that
Mhm.
you might have. And if they wanted to, I suppose, if they wanted to leave you a message on Facebook, they could do that, or
Yes.
they might contact you by email too. So
Yes, they could contact me by email.
if you have,
One of the ways to do that is through the email address jlhiggswilm, WILM, @juno.com.
oh, that's great, great. So we got two ways of
Yes.
contacting you through the Facebook and through your email, and so I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you, and also enjoyed your books and your articles and your magazines, and I laugh and I cry, and so they've always been very informative. So with that, I don't know whether there's anything else you'd like to add, or
The only thing I'd like to add is I would like to thank you
Oh,
for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. And I also would like to put in a plug for your writing,
oh,
because I have read a lot of the work that you have written and the books that you've published. And what I find really fascinating and great about the writing is your ability to present different scientific concepts and ideas in a way that is very easily understandable.
oh, that's nice.
So
Yeah.
it really
Say that.
is very entertaining and enjoyable to be able to read the works that you've written as well.
Well, that sounds very good. And if anyone wants a way of contacting me, I have a website, and that's markryanbooks.com. All one word, MARKRYAN books BOOKS.com. So markryanbooks.com. You can contact me there. I have emails, and I have some of my publications there too. So thank you again. That was a very nice
Sure.
plug that you had given me. I didn't expect that, but I'd like to thank you very much for being here at WCTV.org in Wilmington, Massachusetts. And this is Mark's Musings. We are here once a month, and we at this podcast, and we are simultaneously broadcast at WCTV and also on iTunes and also on SoundCloud. So if you have the opportunity to look us up, you can do those three different places. So with that, I would like to say goodbye for now, and have a nice day. Bye-bye now. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.